Michael Yon, he's talking about migration as a tactic of war. One of the biggest groups that was going through the daring gap were Venezuelan gangs. I've been following closely what's happening in Denver, and I'm very aware of several crimes, violent crimes that have occurred there, attributed to Venezuelan gangs. This Venezuelan gang completely taken over an apartment complex, told local management, the maintenance guy who lived in, that he was not welcome to come back. And they have complete reign over it at this point and are running it as like a criminal den. High trust societies just don't have a defense mechanism for this. They think it's so unreasonable. So they write letters to the state. Aren't you going to do something about this?
That's right. When you're attacked, you counterattack with harsh language. It's part of this Yuri Bezmenov thing, demoralization, where you see things are falling apart all around you. There's no point in planning for the future as things are gradually destabilized and head towards a crisis. At some point, there'll be a flashpoint, but you got to kind of see how things are gradually falling apart. In the 4-year period, roughly from 1968 to 1972, there were 4,000 bombings in the U.S. That's a huge number. Most people are completely unaware we're going to have a much more nasty and violent redux of what we saw in the late 60s and early 70s.
All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with questions from members of the File. And the File is our private member community where we try and tackle some of the problems that we're facing today, both on the financial side and what specifically individuals can do to shield themselves from the difficulties that are definitely coming our way. And our first thing we want to discuss before we get into questions is we had this great interview with Michael Yon the other day, and it was the responses to it were different. Some people thought, for instance, it's the best interview they saw in 10 years, and other people were just scared shitless by it. And so it's like the worst interview I've seen in 10 years. But either way, it had an impact.
That's right. Yeah, well, Michael's definitely of the opinion that the eschaton is about to be imminentized, and we're headed for big trouble. And I think he's right, quite frankly. And Michael's opinion, I thought, was not just good because he's a highly experienced soldier and combat photographer and war reporter who's been all around the world, has lived most of his adult life outside the U.S. in crazy war zones. So he's got a lot of experience, but I don't know if I can't remember if he mentioned this in our interview, that he's in Okinawa now, basically doing a routine of fasting and reading classical books, not late good books published in the last few years, but things that were published 100 or 200 years ago to get the original straight dope from guys back then. So I've got a lot of respect for him and the way he thinks.
Yeah, no doubt. And I didn't realize he was saying that Japan is a bad place to be. He was saying, and I learned today, I can't believe I didn't realize this, is that the U.S.'s ambassador to Japan right now is Rahm Emanuel. Did you know that?
Oh God, what a disaster.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Moving from the Obama administration to mayor of Chicago, and now he's going to fuck up Japan or a relation thereof as best he can. Where do these people come from?
I don't know. It's amazing. I was shocked to hear that it just doesn't go away. These people just stay in.
And once again, nothing against Israelis, but Rahm is an Israeli citizen. And if you're a high up employee of the US government, you shouldn't be serving two masters. You should figure, I mean, it's fine for everybody to have several citizenships, but if you're going to be part of running the government, I mean, choose your master. Come on.
Right. It's like being the CEO of one company and a consultant for its competitor.
Yeah, precisely. Or competitor. Well, in the case of the US and Israel, that's not quite the right word. It would be
closest ally.
Yeah, I hate to say master, but when it comes to Israel and the US, I don't know who's the dog and who's the master, because sometimes the master kicks the dog and sometimes the dog bites the master. And it's hard to tell which is which at this point. They're so intertwined.
That is, it's no doubt. Well, relating to the thrust of the conversation with Michael Yon, he's talking about migration as a tactic of war, and was where because all the stuff that's been happening in the UK recently, with it's gone to real conflict between the natives, if you will, and the new migrants there. Well, and he talks about how this is happening in the US, and he's covered it very well, covering the Darien Gap. And one of the biggest groups that was going through the Darien Gap were Venezuelan gangs. And I keep track of the Denver news because that's where I used to live. And so I understand all the neighborhoods there. I know what it's all like. And so if I want to know what's going on at a local level, it's a good place to follow. And so I've been following closely what's happening in Denver. And I stumbled across this, and I'm very aware of several crimes, violent crimes that have occurred there related or attributed to Venezuelan gangs. And I stumbled across this news, I guess, the other day that showed that, in fact, this Venezuelan gang completely taken over an apartment complex, told local management, the maintenance guy who lived in, that he was not welcome to come back. And they have complete reign over it at this point and are running it as like a criminal den. I mean, in Denver, or it's actually in Aurora, technically.
And these are three separate apartment complexes that I guess are geographically close to each other.
Exactly. And I mean, so I can share just so people can see the screenshot of this, but it's on Twitter. You can see it, but hold on one second. Sorry, here we go. So basically this is all supported by letters from the owner of the building, who basically this is to the Attorney General, Phil Weiser, he was the Attorney General of Colorado at this point, explaining what's going on there. So there's that. Then there's a video of their shots being fired inside of the complex. I mean, it's out of control. And they don't know how to
handle it. A little
bit
unclear from that. Are the current occupants of the building being home invaded exactly? Are they being kicked out and leaving their furniture and things like that behind? Are they white or are they black?
I think they're Venezuelan.
No, that's the invaders, but I mean the current residents.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know who. My guess is that it was originally, or they were using it as a place to keep migrants. That's what I'm speculating from it, is that it was that they had this facility that was not well maintained, that then they signed up for the largesse around there to house the migrants, which lots of places have done. And then so they come in, and then they got enough density there that they decided, no, it's our place now. Don't come back. The maid who works there told in one of these statements, says that she works for them now and she's still cleaning the place. I mean, this is crazy.
Well, it happens in the animal kingdom all the time. I mean, when there's a Twinkie or something that's dropped on the road, I mean, one type of ant comes in, and then if next year breed of ant comes in, they kick the earlier breed of ants out. I mean, caves in the wilderness, the big animals kick out the little animals, and the Wolverine kicks them all out. I mean, it's just the way it is. So if you have a well-organized criminal gang, why not take over some real estate? Who's going to stop them?
Who's going to stop them? Yeah. And I almost would think the way things are, the high trust societies just don't have a defense mechanism for this. They think it's so unreasonable. So they write letters to the state. Aren't you going to do something about this?
That's right. When you're attacked, you counterattack with harsh language.
Exactly. Yeah. And it doesn't really work. And anyway, there's so many examples of the crime from the Venezuelan gangs in and around the Denver area. We have a member of our private group, The File, has a farm about an hour away from Denver. And in his area, he's had to hire private security to guard his property basically 24/7, just to feel safe in it. And he's in a rural area. And because these organized gangs are coming in and they're stealing equipment from people's houses. They see whatever, if they see a front loader, they actually organize themselves and will bring a big flatbed and will go away with it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like in that movie with Al Pacino, Scarface, where I guess his name was Tony Montana, his character, where he was the baddest guy. He was the toughest guy. And so he just took stuff over. And who's going to stop him? Who's going to stop him, frankly? And that's what's going on. Because what I've heard, this is anecdotal, because I haven't been to Venezuela for years, is that all the really bad guys in Caracas have come north because it's easy pickings here, a lot more wealth, people are softer. So actually, the crime situation in Caracas has gotten better as these people have all migrated north. They're professional criminals, quite frankly.
Yeah, one of our viewers is from Canada, and he moved down to Venezuela a year ago, and he's like, life is great. He likes it there a lot.
Yeah, well, if you export all your psychopaths and criminals and this type of thing, yeah. Well, you still have to deal with the government, of course, but still, I can understand that. It might be worth a trip to Venezuela, but well, I don't want to make it, but that'd be a good idea for somebody to do and come back with a boots on the ground firsthand report.
Well, we have another file member he was visiting here last month, and he told me he's planning to be there in September. So maybe I can get some details from him.
I'd love to hear what he has to say. If he knocks on a bunch of doors, makes all the rounds. What I always used to do is call up lawyers, and because they'll give an appointment to anybody, it might be a good client. Call up real estate brokers, though, and both of those groups they know what's going on. And of course, the third thing I always liked to do, because I was interested in it, was visit art galleries, which is connection to a higher strata of society. And you talk to these people, get to know them. And there are other things too, other areas that you have an interest in. And when you go to a city like that, you just don't sit in your hotel room and watch television, which I know some people actually do when they take these trips. But you open up the internet or the yellow pages, such as they are, if they still exist in places, and start making appointments with people to find out what the hell is going on. It'd be fascinating.
Really would. It'd be really interesting to see what's going on there now. Yeah. So anyway, I think Michael Yon is right about this trend, and these issues are going to blow up more. And it's hard to see how they turn into the major flashpoints that we see in the UK right now, but there's certainly the groundwork is being laid for them to occur. No doubt about it.
Yeah, certainly there's a gradual degradation of everything. It's part of this Yuri Bezmenov thing, demoralization, where you see things are falling apart all around you. There's no point in planning for the future as things are gradually destabilized and head towards a crisis. So at some point there'll be a flashpoint, but you gotta kind of see how things are gradually falling apart. And I gotta say it, they are.
Yeah. That point you just made about not seeing a future, I think is so important, because it does seem like you don't see any person in any leadership role at all acting as though they're planning for a future. Like it's all for today. It's all for the here and now. It's all for this moment. They're like nothing's being held back. People aren't even worried about destroying their reputations by lying to people directly anymore. I used to have plausible deniability mattered at some point, but it's all gone now.
No, that's right. And if Kamala is installed in November, what is going to be there in the future? You've got the society falling apart right under your feet, and the government at the top is amplifying the situation and making it much, much harder. So it's game over, man.
It is. And the odds on Kamala's side are looking better by the day. I mean, I guess it was a week ago, we were talking about the situation with her. We're going through Michael Moore's lists of why he thought the Democrats would win, et cetera. We got a lot of criticism saying, oh, you can't trust polls. And I can't believe you're reading what Michael Moore is saying about this. Those things are ridiculous. There's a difference between surveys that are conducted over time and amongst the population and these politically motivated surveys.
Yes. And anyway, we don't really trust anything that comes from these institutions and establishments. But we did fact check it, which is another term which has been we've been disabused of believing anything fact checkers say. But we did our own fact checking, and frankly, Michael Moore, I mean, fat crumb bum that he is, he wasn't lying. I don't think so.
Yeah, now he wasn't focused on certain things. He didn't focus on the fact that most Americans are against this unrestrained migration, for instance. So he didn't focus on certain things that might have like tilted more to the other side of the spectrum. But the things he did talk about were correct largely.
Yeah, and I think the people that don't believe the 20 points that Michael Moore made, and as we pointed out before, those 20 points he made are excellent points. Well, they're sad points, but they're excellent points. But there are a half a dozen other things that are really important that he didn't even mention because mentioning them would expose the illegality of everything that's going to go on. Things
Well, that's a
like,
positive sign, actually. So Michael Moore is imagining a future. He's not willing to at least tell you those things because he will think that there will be consequences in the future. So maybe he is, maybe that is one person who has an eye for the future. I don't know.
well, listen, you don't have to be a weatherman to see which way the wind's blowing, as Bob Dylan's song goes from the 60s. And we're going to have a much more nasty and violent redux of what we saw in the late 60s and early 70s, I think, at a minimum.
Do you think that like all those, I mean, how many bombings were there around the country during that period of time? And
Yes, this is interesting. I did look into this, and in the 4-year period, roughly from 1968 to 1972, there were 4,000 bombings in the US. That's a huge number. Most people are completely unaware of that. I mean, that's amazing. Listen, I remember I was living in Washington, D.C. at that time, and I remember going out on just normal dates with chicks I knew. Like one time we were in Georgetown, and it was very inconvenient because it was right on Wisconsin Avenue. There was tear gas everywhere because the cops were counterattacking whatever was going on. We didn't know what the hell was going on. At the time, we were walking around DuPont Circle, and there was another riot just going on around us where some hippie ran down the street shooting a slingshot with steel balls at a cop, and another hippie was throwing a brick through a bank. I'm telling you, this happened. I was there, just an ordinary guy going out on a date during the early 70s. So yeah, 4,000 bombings. It happened.
that's amazing. And that's just a preview of what, because obviously I think the tools for causing havoc are so much more advanced now. I mean, just think about using drones and all of that. I mean, what's possible is shocking.
Yeah, and race hatred has been ramped up hugely, especially with people like Obama and things that follow. That's happened, and all these migrants who have no attachment to society and see it as just a fat prize. Yeah, they're going to be a problem. So, and of course, the other thing is the average person's financial situation is much worse than it was back then. I mean, look, back in the 60s, if you wanted to buy a car, frankly, you'd save up the money to buy a car. That's what most people did. But then you had 2-year financing on the car. Okay, well, 2 years. But now we're up to 7 years, and not even 7 years. I think a lot of people, most people, for all I know, lease the cars. It goes from being a small asset to an immediate liability. Nobody's got savings. Everybody's in credit card debt. Student loan debt is big now. It was nothing back then. It's all kinds of stuff like this. So the whole society is much more unstable than it was when things fell apart in the late 60s and early 70s. They recovered, and I hope it recovers this time, but it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and we just talking about last week when we got together, we don't trust the polls, but looking at the betting markets on the political campaign, I think is more telling. And last week at this point, Kamala was 11 points behind Donald on Polymarket, 11 points. Today, it's neck and neck at 49% each.
Mm. Well, I placed a bet with a friend on another Zoom call I'm on. Bunch of strange Zoom call in a way. A lot of big deal financial guys and well-known military guys. There's reasons for that. But I placed a bet with one of them for 100 ounces of silver that the Democrats were going to win. And I pointed out to him the reasons why I was on this side. He pointed out the reasons he was on the other side. But the last time I placed a money bet was in 2016. I bet on Trump. So this time, can't do it. Got to bet on the bad guys. And I actually hope I lose, because if Kamala wins, it's game over, man.
Yeah, I mean, you lose either way on the bet. You just lose a lot more if you're right.
That's right. At least I'll have bragging rights. That counts for something. I hope I lose, though, and don't have bragging rights.
It does,
Anyway,
and I have to, because some viewers don't get this, because your vote or you're betting that the Democrats will win does not mean that you want the Democrats to win. Some people don't understand that
no,
sometimes
they
you
don't.
place a bet for that.
No,
But
they don't. So I've explained that, and so I'm on record. We'll see what happens. So, well, listen, in the long run, I I hope it's a story with a happy ending, that we recover from this and go on to bigger and better and greater things, but they're going to be different than the past. The America of the 59 Cadillac and the 65 Corvette, Beach Boys and all that's gone. In fact, the day's coming soon when you're not going to want to ride, you're not going to want to drive an expensive car or a convertible down the street, because it's going to attract too much negative attention, and it might be dangerous, especially with a convertible.
yep, I could see that. I mean, driving around with flashy Mercedes through a big city today is a dangerous exercise, I think, already.
That's right. 25 years from now, there will be Lamborghinis and Ferraris in barns that people will buy for pennies on the dollar.
I think so too. Well, I think we'll come out of it, Doug, but I think we'll come out of it more from, like, my kids will emerge at a time where we're out of it and maybe things could be, but I think between here and that future, there's going to be a lot of hardship for everyone. I can't imagine a way out of it, frankly.
Yeah, well, history will proceed. And unless the Deagle people are right and 75% of the population is wiped out, well, things will still go on. So,
Yeah. Well, let's get to some of these questions. These are a couple I've solicited from our file members, as I said. The first one is asking if you've ever heard of Violet Gibson. It's alleged that she made an attempt to assassinate Mussolini in 1926. Apparently, she shot him through the nostrils at point blank range.
no, never heard of that. And because you sent me her letter earlier, and it really is interesting people have a reasonable grip of how Hitler came to power in Germany, but less of a grip on how Mussolini exactly came to power in Italy, and how Franco came to power in Spain with the Spanish Civil War, which
We
was
don't even
really,
talk about that. That's always avoided talking about that one for some reason.
yeah,
I'm
I'd
just,
like to do some research on it, because the Spanish Civil War might be quite relevant to what's coming up.
I think so. I'm just showing this picture of Mussolini. It's a little Trump-esque with the bandage on the nose and his on the ear, I have to say.
Mm. There he is. Good looking guy. He was kind of a war hero, actually. He was no shrinking violet. He was no namby-pamby, and good looking guy. Out of uniform, civilian clothes. So there's lots of sides to all these characters.
Yeah, of course. No. They always want you to think it's black and white. It's good guy, bad guy. That's all there is. There's no complexity to any human.
Yeah. Even the devil incarnate, worst person in all of human history, Adolf Hitler, they say. Few people are aware of the fact that although he was only an enlisted man in the German army, he served for 4 years on the front lines and won the Iron Cross first class, which was extremely unusual for an enlisted man to win an Iron Cross first class. So it's not like Hitler didn't have some, I guess, I guess we can get excised or canceled for saying something like this. I'm just saying it's a fact that nobody ever talks about, because the devil can't do any good, apparently, or shouldn't, or whatever.
Right, exactly. I wanted to say, I'm trying to, well, he asked if you see any parallels today between between today and the days preceding the Spanish Civil War. But maybe you want to research that
I
one
want to
more.
research that because it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that it was almost an attempted like Bolshevik revolution there, right? Wasn't that kind of the how it started?
I wouldn't doubt that because all of these countries in Europe playing off of the Russian Revolution, uh, the Trotskyites tried to export it to the rest of Europe. And after World War One, the rest of Europe was pretty devastated, and they were anxious for a big change in things. You know, steal the money from the rich guys. They stole it from us. Let's steal it back. That type of thing. Power to the people. The rest of it.
Well, I think I remember reading somewhere that Spain's gold was shipped to Russia
Hmm. Hadn't
in
heard
that.
that.
Yeah. I'll double check these facts. That's what I remember reading. My memory isn't like yours, but this is what I recall.
Well, speaking of gold, it's a bad move, I think, on Malay's part. Got to find out the continuing drama of that he wants to ship Argentina's two, what do they have? 2 million ounces or $2 billion worth of gold to Europe to lend the money out, which impresses me as incredibly stupid because when you lend the money out, there's no guarantee you're going to get it back for lots of reasons.
Yeah, I know. I know he said, well, it's just sitting here. We're not earning any, money with it. We need to, if we send it away, we can essentially use it as collateral or something.
Well, that's not the point. I mean,
Exactly. It's a reserve.
I know he knows better than that, so I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah. It's a bad sign. I don't know. You get the bankers involved. It concerns me.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's got a really sound grip on philosophy and economics and all of this. I mean, he's a completely solid ANCAP, but he's in a cesspool, and maybe he's being, overwhelmed by it at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. It's hard to say. The next question is about JD Vance. We've talked a little bit about him before, and obviously, I think a lot of heat that may have been on JD Vance when he was announced as the vice presidential candidate kind of faded away in light of definitely even worse VP selection from Kamala Harris. This Minnesota governor who's just seems like a lunatic, honestly. But so this question about JD Vance, he says, when I see this guy, for some reason, I'm subconsciously like repulsed by him. I don't really know why. But he said, but there's a couple things that bother me about it. He said, first of all, he's supposedly Catholic and he married a woman who's Hindu. And he said, like, it's fine. You can believe whatever you want. But it's weird that Christianity and paganism, such conflicting ideologies between the two of them, it's like capitalism and communism. And he said, let's imagine an alternative universe where Doug is single. Would he marry a communist?
No, and frankly, I think when you get married, you really ought to marry somebody that you share basic values, cultural and otherwise, with. Because, if your wife is a dogmatic Catholic churchgoer, I mean, I grew up in the Catholic Church myself, so I know what that's all about. And you're not, you're asking for conflict down the road. And I don't know what kind of a Hindu she is, but if she still practices Hinduism, I don't know. It seems like bad judgment on his part. I
Yeah.
mean,
So
after all, there's like 4 billion females in the world, and probably 10% of them are possibly eligible partners. You do best to stick with something that heads off conflicts. So I agree with her. This is problematical.
yeah. So there's that. And then he's like, and the second reason he said, is the book he wrote. And I didn't read the book, so I can't say what it was about. I mean, I've heard about what it's about. But he said, maybe I'm the weird one here, but I can't comprehend how a man of decency can show his mother's dirty laundry to the whole world. I get it that she was a dysfunctional drug addict and maybe a bad mother, but I don't get how someone who remotely loves his parents or has some minimal respect for the idea of or his relationship with them can tell such stories about his mom in public. He said, would Doug ever publish a book that would depict his parents in such an embarrassing manner?
Well, I was fortunate in that both of my parents were decent people, so I don't have to cross that particular bridge. But on the other hand, I think that who your parents are and where you're born and your early circumstances it's an accident of birth. I mean, who knows? I could have been, born in the Congo jungle. And there I am, maybe same person. But I think if JD has bad feelings about his parents because they were bad people, he's using critical thinking. And you don't want to air your dirty laundry. But then again, he's trying to make a point, I think. I haven't read the book either, about the cultural cesspool that's
In
built
Appalachia.
up over time, and this is part of it. So you got to tell the story. So it's kind of one of these sad but true things where you don't want to display the dirty laundry, but at the same time, you want to clear the air and air out these things and call it a spade.
So this one doesn't seem unreasonable to you. I mean,
No, it doesn't. And frankly, the Kamala selection is a total and complete scumbag, borderline sociopath, no question about it, maybe a real sociopath. Seems to me that J.D. Vance has elevated himself from a very low level. And they made a big deal out of this thing about childless cat ladies. And well, I'm sorry if that alienates a few women, but the women that it alienates are going to be childless cat ladies or cat lady adjacent. So to hell with them. And reasonable, right thinking, critical thinking women are going to say, yeah, they are crazy. And the fact that they're women doesn't mean I have to support them. That's crazy.
right. Yeah, no, I agree. And the one other thing about JD that I found weird is his multiple name changes. I
Oh,
just
yeah,
find that
right.
strange.
Yeah,
You know,
that is strange. Yeah.
and I said something about it publicly, and I got people criticizing me for criticizing it. I'm really just asking questions about it. Well, I was kind of implying that it's strange for a person into adulthood to change their name. And I mean, and he has done that. I think it's 4 name changes in his life. He's had 2 of them since he's been an adult.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, if you want to change your name and call yourself Snoop Dogg, for instance, all right, that's your new name and it's your business. So I don't have any problem with that. But multiple name changes, uh, the thing that kind of disturbs me most about Vance is that I guess he wanted to get into politics for a long time, which means that he's got the heart of a busybody, whether we know it or not.
Yeah, and his elevation does feel a little Obama-esque to me. You know, he's got that best-selling memoir. Now he's got a movie that the movie's out and it's like directed by Ron Howard about the book.
Hmm.
And when he's a one-term senator who is now going for VP, it just feels a little Obama-esque.
Yeah, it's like we're presented with these candidates by various arms of the establishment.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be true. But you're right. This Waltz guy,
Oh,
they changed the Minnesota flag to more closely resemble the Somali national flag. Did you know that?
I heard that. And I
Yeah,
think I looked at them and I said, well, maybe there's something to that. Yeah.
yeah. So there's that, and then of course he's got the transgender stuff, and he's like says screw First Amendment rights, basically.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
if it's misinformation, I mean,
that was horrible. First Amendment doesn't apply when you're saying something that's misinformation or hate speech.
right. So I mean, and I think this is what you get at where you say it's game over if Kamala wins because they want the guns, they want free speech to go away. What remains of it, they want that gone. They're going to go after the people on the right in the same way that you see the UK now going after people on the right, the 2-tier justice system or whatever. And that's frightening.
And between Obama and Biden and, God forbid, Harris, they're going to clean out anybody with halfway decent values from all these government agencies. They're going to put on new government agencies and hire the worst kind of people for them. So at that point, they're going to be so entrenched that it's going to be really hard. And they're going to help to change the culture of the country. They're going to try to normalize this kind of corruption. So it's very serious.
It's very serious. Yeah. All right, this is a question from a couple of weeks ago, but someone asks, what do you think of Nigel Farage, the Reform Party leader in the UK? And asks if you've ever met him by chance.
Well, in 6 weeks, I'm going to Kuala Lumpur for a conference, and Farage is one of the other speakers there. So I suspect I'll get to know him to some degree. What I know about him, having watched his performances in the European Parliament when he was a member of it, I thought he was marvelous. He would call out those scumbags in the European Parliament and treat them with the respect that they deserve, which is absolutely none.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of chutzpah. It takes a lot of nerve to do that, to stand up in a room full of, powerful, evil people and call them out. And he's done that. And most of what I hear that he says is pretty good. So I'm favorably impressed.
Yeah, he's a good communicator for sure. I mean, he's a very effective communicator.
Yeah, so I think I support him pretty thoroughly.
Okay. As much as you can support any politician, that is.
That's right. That's right. In that context.
Do you know who Alistair MacLeod is?
Heard the name, but I don't know anything about him really.
I know he's a big gold guy, older guy, and he says somebody just asked this question. He said he recently shared a chart, and I couldn't find the chart itself. He said, proving that there's virtually no correlation to interest rates and inflation. He says that years can go by when the Fed lowers or raises interest rates without the intended result occurring, meaning inflation rate adjustments. Why doesn't anyone in the financial channels point this out, that there isn't that clear correlation between the two? Well, first of all, is that true?
I don't know if it's, well, is the statement true? No, I don't know. I don't think that's quite true because, well, first of all, interest rates are totally screwed up because of the central banking system to start with. They can create, and they are creating, trillions of dollars, taking government deficits, and those deficits are sold to the central bank, and the central bank deposits Federal Reserve notes in the commercial bank accounts that are owned by the US government. So the US government has commercial bank accounts with Citibank or Morgan Stanley or whoever, and writes checks about it. But that money is created by the Federal Reserve. That's one thing. But that's only part of the picture. And of course, the Fed calls the interest rates that it wants to do what it wants to. But an even more important part of the picture is that the money that goes into the commercial banking system, these banks lend it out at, well, the most that they can get. Now, what determines interest rates? This is look, on the one hand, let's suppose that a normal economy in normal times, this is no longer true, increases about the real wealth in the world by about 3% per year. That's kind of a historically good number, which has been changing in recent years. So if you're going to lend money to a bank, the bank has got to pay you at least 3% theoretically to make up for and then the bank lends it out for 6%. So those are kind of normal interest rates. 3% when you lend to a bank and 6% when the bank lends out. But there's all kinds of things. There's like the rate at which the currency is being debased. I mean, if you're suffering 25 or 50% inflation, you're not going to take less than that. So inflation does affect interest rates very definitely from that point of view. And there's the risk part of the equation too. You lend the money out, maybe in an unstable economy, you need a big premium because you may not get it back. So you got both of those factors. So I'd like to see the chart, and maybe, I don't know, is it a chart going back 200 years or 10 years that he's talking? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so to the person who asked this question, if you send me the chart, I'll forward it along to Doug and we can get his response to it.
Yeah, I'd like to see the chart. If we're lucky, we learn something new every day.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Someone asked about Argentina. Say, what part of Argentina offers the most promise for quality of life in 5 years' time? Is it Mendoza, Buenos Aires, like someplace else? What do you think about different areas of Argentina?
Okay, well, Mendoza, wonderful, on the Chilean border, lots of lakes, vineyards, reasonable sized city, maybe 1 million people. Good choice. Buenos Aires, all things happen in Buenos Aires, like a big city, that's fine. I mean, I'm a fan of Patagonia, which is Neuquén province, and especially a town called San Martin de los Andes, which looks like it was plucked from Bavaria and dropped into Argentina with lakes and skiing and rivers. It's a really delightful place. Small, I mean, San Martin's only, what, 10 or 15,000 people. And of course, I'm a fan in the north of Argentina, of Salta province of Cafayate, which is a really delightful town. So where's the best place to go? I don't know. It depends on what you want. Look, nobody can answer that question. What you got to do is go down there and stay for a month and rent a car and just drive around all over the country and see what you like. I mean, and where the values are. I mean, in outside of San Martin, Bill Bonner and I bought a piece of land, got a long time ago, 20 years ago, more. And what did we pay for it back then? I think we paid $1.5 million for it. Incredible piece of land, 2,300 acres, a big lake, 3 little lakes, 2 rivers, right on the main road, not that far out of town. And what can we get for it now? Well, more than what we paid for it, but
But the money's half or less than half.
yeah, exactly. Not enough to make up for the depreciation of the dollar, quite frankly.
So it's still
So
cheap.
it's still cheap. Still, things are still cheap in Argentina. And it all depends as to whether Milei is successful in destroying Argentina's deep state, which is as entrenched as it is in the US.
Someone asked about, we've done these private placement deals as part of with our VIP subscription. Someone asked, if you don't qualify as an accredited investor, is there any way to get warrants and early purchases of the companies you feel will achieve tremendous growth? He says, he talks about another program, another newsletter he subscribed to, which sometimes did allow that for non-accredited investors.
Yeah, I think I know the newsletter you're talking about. I think the deals turned out to be disasters uniformly.
I think so too.
But well, you know, when you're signing up for a private placement, you have to sign something that says that you're an accredited investor. Well, maybe you don't tell the truth, or maybe you overstate your assets because you think, so it's not like you have to send them an audited statement. But I don't recommend you.
Yeah.
Private placements are for larger amounts of money, generally speaking. And if you're not an accredited investor, you're putting too much money into what is, of its nature, a very speculative deal. And so,
Yeah, I don't like the
yeah,
accredited
you can
investor
do it, but
rules.
it's probably not such a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I hate the accredited investor rules where they say, this is for this predefined class of person and you can't, and this is, so basically honestly, the rich people get access to deals that other people don't. That's just a fact.
That's right.
And it shouldn't, I don't like those rules the SEC has. I don't like them, but they are the rules. And the thing is that if you, they are speculative though, and they don't, and a lot of times if you really are if you're really not sophisticated, you can destroy yourself in them, just like with any other investment.
Yep, that's absolutely true. And private placement deals generally don't have any liquidity in addition. So if you need the money anytime in the near future, you're probably out of luck there too.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so next question is, are you familiar with the Heartland versus Rimland theory?
Yeah, it's basically, this is geopolitics, which I don't know if I believe in that even. It's basically, is it better to be a naval power that extends out and is next to the ocean, or a central power where you're inland? And there's advantages to both. But as far as what kind of a country is going to win, I don't think whether you're Rimland or Heartland, that's not a good way to look at it. The way to look at it is what's the culture in the country? Is it a culture that tends to build capital and is a high trust society, has the right kind of values? So it doesn't matter if you're a Rimland or a Heartland country. It's the values of the people that live there.
Right. So you could pick like a rimland example, like maybe Somalia, right? And right. And
Yeah,
say, would they do better than, I don't know, pick a Congo?
or a Rimland country like Japan. There's all the difference in the world
Oh,
between.
yeah, 100%. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. All these geopolitical theories are funny. We were just talking before the call about how effective having a model of the world can be. Something simple like the Rimland Heartland theory can be a useful template for viewing the world under certain circumstances, but yeah, you can't universally apply any simple like abstraction to the real world consistently.
Yeah, no magic mechanical formula like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And sure, it's better. I mean, you pick a country, any country, hey, I'd like a country that's got lots of mineral resources and fish resources and is on the ocean, has good harbors and has rivers. But there's lots of countries like that have gone absolutely nowhere, whether they're Rimland or Heartland. And so it's not the important point to make.
Right. What you make of the place is different. I mean, this is how you have Singapore pull itself, which had a natural asset, but really because of the leadership, I'd say, and the culture of the people, like really turn it into a real thriving economic unit, right?
Or South Korea, because during
Right.
the Korean War, the Americans dropped more bombs on Korea than they dropped on both Germany and Japan during all of World War II. I believe that's a correct statistic. I mean, the Americans didn't leave a building with, you know, two bricks on top of one another in Korea. And now it's one of the most prosperous countries in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a couple weeks ago, you were talking about Hackworth, and I brought up his book. That's where I learned that basically they bombed it so badly there weren't two bricks standing on each other. It was from that book where I learned that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But it had the Korean people.
That's all that makes all the difference. Culture comes down to culture.
Culture.
Okay, so this one is kind of a conspiracy oriented one. It says I'm reading Rule by Secrecy, which I haven't read. He says it covers secret societies and their pervasive effect on society. Given your connections, I'd like to hear Doug's views on the Council of Foreign Relations.
Well, it's one of these it's one of these deep state clubs where it's much larger than or Bilderberg, or what's that one that meets out in the trees in Northern
Oh,
California, Bohemian Grove. Yeah, but it's the same kind of people at all these things. They invite, top top university presidents and professors and top corporate guys and government guys that are on their way up, and they all get together and compare notes and share their political views, which is easy to do because their political views are already all shared and common with each other. So, as a general rule, I'd say horrible people. It's a party that if I was invited to go to, I wouldn't. Oh, I'd go to one meeting, but
you wouldn't be invited back, I don't
I wouldn't
think.
be invited back. That's right. And a couple of how many years ago was this? I was invited to one of these parties. It was a group that was like the WEF, that some billionaires were getting off the ground in New York, and horrible people across the board. They're just, how I got invited to it's a long story, but I thought it was a complete waste of time, and none of the people there were people that I wanted to get to know better. So I've actually been there and done that. For
Was
all
the sorry, go ahead.
no, that's all. That's all I was
Was
saying.
was that Project for New American Century? Did that come out of the Council of Foreign
No, what the
Relations?
hell was the name of that group that I was a member of, or not a member of, but invited to go to? Um, and I didn't say anything or do anything. I just listened to these people. So I got invited back a second time, but I didn't want to go back. The hell was the name of that thing? I don't know. Anyway,
It's all right. Dude, yeah. Yeah. CFR definitely has a lot of bad associations, that organization. From their names would always pop up. There's always CFR members in every cabinet of every government, right? They're everywhere.
they're all the same drill. Statists, collectivists, big government type people, deep staters, right?
Okay. Um, Question for Doug regarding Ray Dalio. We did a video on him, I don't know, maybe it was a month ago now, talking about he actually said the same thing that Michael Yon said, which is that you've got to be prepared to fight or flee. Or he said, keep your head down. I think was the other option, but we don't think that'll be an option. And so he had the same conclusion. So we did that video, and somebody asked, following up to that, um, he says, for families that may not have unity within, like they're not fully aligned on the severity of what's actually happening right now, what would Doug's stay and fight option most likely look like in the coming years ahead for a family? Like, what does he suggest for that option? I guess the idea is his family's not on board with the idea that things are getting so bad. The deterioration is like they don't see what maybe this guy sees. You can't convince them. So the only other option then, according to Dalio and Michael Yon, is stay and fight. So like, what is it? What would you do if you're in that situation? Like, how do you make it through that?
Well, first of all, you didn't inculcate the right values in your family, I'd say. So it's kind of your fault, if that's the situation that you're in.
It's tough love, but it's true.
Yeah, it's true. And the second thing I'd say is that if you get out of town, well, desert your family. Well,
Ah,
yeah, people don't like the idea of doing that, but you could be doing them a favor because they're probably going to be in big trouble. And if you have a solid point someplace else, they can gravitate to you later. So you'd be doing them a favor, but that's very complicated. But if I was going to stay in the US, I would be in a quiet rural area, one that's kind of culturally close knit. Frankly, I'm not a religious person, but I'd like an area where there's a church every mile down the road and people get together and go to church every Sunday. Maybe the minister is going to be feeding them a bunch of crap, but still they have something that they believe in, which is more or less traditional. So that's what I would do. I would take a rural area that has that kind of a background. Problem is, maybe you can't support yourself in that area because they're generally low income areas.
that's true. That's a big problem. You know what? I was talking with some of the file members about this issue, and they're saying I can't get my wife on board with looking internationally, looking at Uruguay or something like that. And I said, the problem is, I think, fundamentally, is that you're not showing them a vision of the future of what life could be like. They can see that you're freaked out about what's happening right now, but your solution is the unknown. It's like so theoretical. And I said, for me, with my family, we came to Uruguay. I had to paint a picture for them. I had to sell them on the idea of it, and create a vision that they could buy into, that they could support, that they would be enthusiastic about. And that's kind of your job as the leader of the household, I think, is that you have to chart a course where it's not like it doesn't feel like an escape. It feels much more like going towards something everyone's interested in going toward.
That's an excellent point. And, of course, you can say, well, a family is a democracy. Yeah, I guess it is. But on the other hand, Chairman Mao said, the helmsman sets the course that sails the ship.
You do,
So
but if
ship
you
that
don't want
doesn't
to,
have a helmsman is going to wind up on the rocks.
that's true. But if you don't want a mutiny, people have to believe you're acting in their best interest.
Yep, that's all true. I think, well, you have to make a decision. That's a
Yeah,
lot of it depends on your financial wherewithal, because if you have enough money, you can do both. You can stay at home in the right place, and you can have a crib abroad as well.
that's right. Yeah, and I think one of the things people with they think about going internationally, they just don't have the boots on the ground experience that you talk about people needing all the time. They haven't spent time in that destination, so they can't paint the picture for the family. It seems so vague to them.
Exactly. They don't know what they're getting into because they really haven't traveled enough to actually see and get to know people other places in the world, and that it's a real problem. They can see what the problem is and what they'd like to do, but they don't have the tools to deal with it.
Right. And I think that if
So
you're, go ahead.
you should get the tools before it's really too late. And it's getting very late in the day because we're going to get foreign exchange controls for sure. I think no matter who wins, but certainly when Kamala wins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. So whether you're going to stay in the US or go somewhere else, you have the obligation to paint a picture for your family about like what to do, how you're going to live your life. You have to lead it, I think. And you have to put energy into that, not just simply doom scrolling and bad news and trying to agitate your wife into doing something and into engaging probably a rash decision on your part because you're running away from something rather than towards something.
That's an excellent point. I totally agree. You don't want to run away from something. You want to move towards something that you can be sure is better or reasonably sure.
Yeah, that's one thing we get a lot of criticism about, especially in the last month or maybe 2 months. People saying, "Yeah, you guys are running away. Go ahead and run away. We're going to stay and fight." And I find it hilarious that people
Oh,
have that attitude because it just shows like everything it's binary for everybody. It's either red or blue. It's like Ukraine or Russia. It's
yeah,
like this is the same thing.
it's crazy. And if we're on a ship and you can see the ship is taking on water, I think only an idiot stays on the ship.
That's right. And I also say my ancestors came over on the Mayflower, and I guess they ran away too. So I think that there is the American tradition that I like to tie myself to is the people who ran away to the place where they could build a future with great risk to them, but where they could build something.
Yeah, and my family did the same thing. They got out of Ireland during the potato famine.
All right. They ran away. They
They ran
abandoned the
away.
fight.
That's right. Stay in the fight and starve to death with all the other peasants.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so foolish. Last question for you is someone asked if you're familiar with the rural event in Buenos Aires. And he says, what other event or places do you recommend experiencing country life in Argentina?
Well, that is the biggest fair in Argentina. It's like a giant state fair, but it's basically right in the city. And I've gone to it once, and they have everything that you expect at a state fair. All the farm equipment people, and they're selling things, and they have cows and horses, and it's just like a state fair. That's what it's called the Rural.
Hmm.
And so you want to go to it, I guess.
Yeah. Are there any other events like that if somebody want to get a taste of the rural culture, the country life in Argentina? Is there some other way that someone could get a taste of it if they're down in Argentina? Instead of just going to Buenos Aires, is there some place they could go or some place they could visit that would give them a sense of that rural life?
Well, that Rural is the big, like nationwide fair. And I guess the provinces have their own equivalents of it too. But one of the problems is although Argentina is a very sophisticated country, and many people, especially younger people, do speak English. But you jump into a society that language barrier is inconvenient.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there for now, Doug. We'll be back next week. I expect more insanity to occur between now and when we get together again, but I hope you have a good weekend. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks. And I suspect, as you said, we'll have further proof of what Lenin said. There are years when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when years happen.
Yeah. Feels like that lately. No doubt about it. Okay. See you soon, Doug. Thanks.